I thought might be really useful for you is to actually hear from someone who was herself diagnosed with wheat intolerance and has actually, found her way through it beautifully. Because what I see with almost everyone who gets diagnosed with wheat intolerance is huge dismay, and I've even had clients say to me, well, that's it. It's almost like, my life is over sort of thing. So, how do you cope with it? That's really important. Now, I've known Wendy for years, both before and after that, you were diagnosed, and I can speak from experience that it has made a massive difference to Wendy's life, one way or the other. So, Wendy, would you like to just sort of start by sort of telling me a little bit about the Wendy before you were diagnosed, how you felt and how you looked, and the impact it was having on you?
Of course, yes, thank you, Sarah. This is a subject I'm really, really passionate about. Before I gave up wheat, I was, for a start, about 4.5 stone heavier, and I was in a relationship that wasn't serving me. I was exhausted all the time. I had 2 young children that I adored, but I was propping myself up with coffee and chocolate and trying to struggle through the day. Looking back, I really wasn't in great health. As I say, far too overweight, suffered greatly in extremes of temperature, noticed that I had pimples on the back of my arms, and I kind of ran this perennial feeling of, when I look back on it, I can describe it as kind of worthlessness and shame and fear, and was constantly questioning what everything was about, and I just didn't really understand the way I felt. I always considered myself to be quite a healthy eater, and the reason why is because I love fruit and vegetables, so I would always put fruit and vegetables on the side of everything I did eat. But when I look back now, my diet was largely gluten and dairy based.
It is for most people.
I think it is. I mean, gluten and dairy is everywhere. I absolutely adored pasta. Macaroni cheese was my idea of nirvana. Vegetarian lasagnas, pub meals with big crusty bread on the side, absolutely gorgeous. So looking back, that little bit of salad that I was having on the side actually was going nowhere close to mitigating the fact that I was eating so much wheat and so much dairy, which tends to go hand in hand, and also sugar. So my life was very, very different, and the thing was that I considered myself to be a healthy person, and I think that was part of the problem. I'd spent most of my life on one form of diet or another, and I was always quite an active person. So I would ride and I would walk and I would ski and I would, run. And I could never understand why I was this skinny person trapped in this body that didn't seem to suit me. Does that make any sense?
It makes complete sense. Now, you were diagnosed via a blood test, weren't you? Antibodies were found in your blood against wheat. So how did you feel when you first heard that diagnosis, and how did you cope with it?
Well, let's put it this way, I wasn't really very chuffed.
Nobody is.
My nutritionist happened to have been an American lady at the time, and I remember thinking, well, I'm sure everybody in LA has a food intolerance, and I really did not want to engage with that intolerance on any level.
Complete denial.
No, I didn't. I really didn't want to know, and I thought, that's incredibly princess, and I can't be one of these people who goes into a restaurant or goes to somebody's house and says, oh, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. I had a massive issue with it. I felt that it wasn't me, that I didn't want to be one of these people that had a food intolerance. And at the time, it was about 5 years ago now, and at the time everybody had a food intolerance. It was just beginning to become fashionable to have a food intolerance. And to be honest with you, that was one of my first reactions. But the initial one was, actually, if I can't eat macaroni cheese,
specifically macaroni cheese.
I have a fixation on macaroni cheese. I actually don't want to be alive. I do not want to live on this planet without macaroni cheese. And then I thought about crusty bread and lovely homemade cakes and, my lovely lasagna at my favourite pub. And I really just thought, oh, I don't want to know. And I was in denial. I was lucky actually because I was part of a group program when I was diagnosed, and I think it was the fact that I would have let the group down if I had gone along and carried on eating wheat, and that was just enough to have that support up front to snap me out of that way of thinking. But the desire to be pulled back into the thing that is doing you damage is really, really acute.
Yeah. And Wendy's made a really, really good point there, because one of the things that wheat does is it actually plugs into the morphine receptors, the opiate receptors in the brain. So you actually get a fix. It is addictive. And for some people, it's incredibly addictive, more so than others. So it is like being asked to come off heroin or something. You cannot imagine how you can do it. So you are totally, totally dismayed. Yeah. So having had this diagnosis and all of these emotions and feelings running through you, how did you handle it? And this is what people really want to know. How do you handle it? How do you find substitute foods? How do you have a decent diet that doesn't include macaroni cheese?
I know, it's just really out there, isn't it? Guess what? You can get gluten-free pasta. So here's the thing. I think that you have to, first of all, allow yourself to say yes to you, to say yes to the fact that if you have been diagnosed with a wheat intolerance, I can tell you firsthand that giving wheat up will be the single most incredible thing that you have ever done in your life, not only in terms of your health, but also in terms of how you feel as a person. So with that in mind, let me try and tell you what I did. So this was 5 years ago now. And the very first thing that I did, or the first approach that I tried to take, was to look at the things that I had been eating, so sandwiches and macaroni cheese, and try to find the gluten-free versions of bread.
That's what everybody does.
And the gluten-free versions of pasta. Yeah. And I was also trying to cut out dairy as well. So I was looking for substitutes for the way that I used to eat.
So we look to our usual eating patterns and try to replicate them.
We do.
Just without gluten.
We do, because it's a shock.
It
you
is,
know, when you first are told you can't have your sandwich for lunch, and you think, well, I don't really want to not have a sandwich.
What do I have if I don't have a sandwich, or I don't have a sausage roll, or a pork pie, or whatever it might be?
Exactly. So to begin with, what you tend to do is you scrat around a bit and you try to find things that substitute the way you used to eat. Now, finding gluten-free bread is hit and miss. I believe that some of the products that you can now get in the shops are much better than others, but it's trial and error. You will find that most substitute bread doesn't really taste very nice. And so in the end, what tended to happen with me was I came away from bread and moved more towards, for example, oat cakes. And then I moved away from oat cakes towards gluten-free wraps. And then suddenly I realised, actually, I don't really need that carbohydrate-dense kind of a lunch. So what I found was that I was moving towards things like a handful of nuts instead of bread. And then suddenly my body was feeling lighter and lighter. And then more recently, and this, if you like, is almost stage 3, you find products that you never actually even thought existed before. So, for example, now I make one of my tuna mix salads and I wrap it in some seaweed, those seaweed nori rolls. So actually you're eating no carbohydrate in there at all, and you've got this delicious, gorgeous meal that you never would have dreamt of eating when you're first diagnosed as having a wheat intolerance. So I'd encourage people to be really kind to themselves. Begin the journey by trying to mirror what they used to like, but then be open-minded to other alternatives, and your body almost tells you that it wants to.
And that's a really important message, is to listen to your body, isn't it? And to not be afraid of this, to treat it as an adventure. I mean, to give you some idea of time frame, I think really for the first 2 years that I was diagnosed with this wheat intolerance, I was essentially cooking the same way as I always had, but just substituting the gluten-free things in. What then happened, which was actually a delight for me, is that you then, over a period of time, begin to broaden out with what you eat, and then food really becomes exciting. One thing that you do need to watch when you're trying to go wheat-free is that you don't go to the supermarket, buy the free-from type ranges, and end up with really high levels of processed sugar. Because that can sometimes be the case. I mean, the free-from ranges on the whole are junk foods, so it's not a good substitute.
They are, and I mean, you know, it's a really powerful message to try. There is no gluten in naturally occurring fruits, vegetables, and high quality proteins. So if you can move towards foods that you create in your kitchen from scratch, then you are not going to go far wrong with that.
What about convenience? Because this is one of the things that, you know, wheat is a very convenient food, and working mums, you know, etc. Time is always an issue. So how inconvenient have you found it?
Well, at first, you've got to get your head around it. So at first, you will have a period of inconvenience, I'm not going to lie. What you need to do is find some staples that work for you. So one of my very favourites is to have a tuna mix salad in the fridge. And it's canned tuna with things like carrot and celery and sweet corn and a bit of basil and some dressing, and you bung it in the fridge and you have it there at all times. So that when you get that nibbly feeling and you're maybe still cooking wheat for the rest of the family, because maybe they haven't got their head around it yet, then you can get home, get a big scoop of that, put some nuts on it and satiate yourself first before you then go on to cook other things. I always, for example, have an organic bar in my bag, and I'm sure you can give people the link to those. You're looking for a raw, cold-pressed, refined sugar-free, gluten-free substitute for things like chocolate and biscuits. Because what you're looking for is to pack your diet with a nutritional punch.
So it's dense.
Really nice and dense, so that you don't crave it's almost like an inflamed feeling that you get from eating wheat.
Yes, very much so.
So always in my handbag, I have one of these bars. So there's my handbag right next to me here. And here's an example of a gluten-free bar that I always have in my bag. You can have dairy and gluten-free chocolate. And I tend to like green and blacks. You might always want a citrus fruit in your bag with some salt, because we're actually deficient in salt.
Just a little bit of forethought.
Tiny bit of forethought, feeling your way, finding products that work for you that aren't full of ingredients that you can't pronounce. If you look on the back of a packet and there's something on there that you can't pronounce the ingredients, don't go near it.
It's quite terrifying what's in some things. So, you know, this has been a real journey for you. And I mean, I've eaten with Wendy on numerous occasions, and she does wonderful food. I mean, really super food. It's healthy. It's satisfying. It's tasty. So, you know, whatever the journey's been, you've kind of conquered it. So how do you now feel about the diagnosis that you have, and also what happens if some wheat does sneak back in?
Okay, well, how do I feel about the diagnosis? I can honestly say that it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life, with hindsight.
Really positive.
I mean, it was insanely positive. For a start, in the first 7 months after diagnosis, I lost 4 stone. So the weight just fell off me. Suddenly, this missing key, and those of you that perhaps are carrying weight with this particular issue, you will find the weight falls away because it's inflammation from the wheat that's causing the weight gain. And then, of course, you know, your body buffers against all the chemicals that's going around your system. And I'm sure that you can explain that in nutritional terms. But the weight loss was phenomenal. So that was the first thing. And of course, when your first thought in the morning as you wake up is not, oh God, I'm still fat, then suddenly your life starts to look really different.
It starts to expand.
It really does. And you know, the unhappy relationship that I was in, I came out of. You know, the career that I was looking to develop began to happen. I moved house. I met the man of my dreams. I'm getting married. You know, even just little things like deciding where to go on holiday. I would studiously avoid anywhere where I had to take any clothes off because I hated myself. I didn't like the way that I looked. And the feelings of worthlessness, the feelings of being lost, all of that is gone. So, you know, I remember one day thinking, oh, I feel so much better. I've lost all this weight. Surely it's not the wheat. Surely it's not. And I'd cooked my kids a pizza. They occasionally have a pizza for a treat. and they'd eaten most of it apart from one slice, and I thought, I'll just have a slice of that. That'll be fine. I'm sure it won't.
Let's just push the boundaries.
And you know, I immediately had that flood of worthlessness.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary.
It was that quick.
It was that quick. And that would have been about a year after giving it up. And I remember just thinking, that's enough. I don't need this.
Yes.
My life is so much better for not having it. So for me, I really have got to the stage where I've decided that I am worth more than that feeling. And you have to really be able to put yourself first.
Yeah.
Now, lots of things have wheat in, and you know, I'm not a celiac, so I've not been diagnosed with that.
Yeah.
So I can have a little bit of wheat by mistake,
Yes.
and it doesn't, you know, it isn't catastrophic for me. So let's say, for example, I'm out and we're having Sunday lunch, and there's a gravy on the Sunday lunch. If I'm not sure whether or not it's got a little bit of wheat in, I don't panic.
Yeah.
Because my understanding is that after a while your gut begins to heal
Very much so.
from the inflammation.
Yeah.
So you can occasionally, or at least I can, buffer just a tiny bit of wheat in the diet without it being catastrophic.
And although it may trigger a response, you can pull back from it very quickly.
You can. And the trick is to not do that thing that we sometimes do where we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yes.
We say, well, I've had a cake, so I might as well spend the rest of my week eating wheat. Just don't do that. What you'll probably find is it'll take a couple of days to get yourself right again. So drink plenty of water, perhaps a bit of lemon in it, and you'll find within 2 days it clears out of your system. But honestly, once you've got it out of your system, you will not want it back in your system, I promise you. It's really, really amazing to be wheat-free.
Well, that is such a positive message. So thank you so much, Wendy, for sharing all of that. And the good news is that Wendy's going to share a lot of her wheat-free, gluten-free recipes with us all as well. So you've got a real treat in store there. So I hope that's actually maybe helped to alleviate some of the dismay that you may be feeling at this moment. You know, there really is life after wheat, and there is a delicious diet out there waiting for you. It's just finding your way towards it.